just so you know. We are so happy you are here to participate with us. Thank you for having to move it to our snow date. This meeting will be offered in English and 6 other languages. We'll offer it in Arabic, Dari, Pashto, Spanish, Urdu, and Vietnamese. At this time, will the Arabic interpreter one please read the screen on how to get into the interpretation portal?
أهلا بيكم في الاجتماع السنوي لبرنامج العنوان الأول تايتل 1. احنا بنشكركم ان انتوا جيتوا معانا هنا النهاردة، وبنشكركم ان انتوا اخترتوا الميعاد الجديد بسبب تغيير الجو. لو حابين، احنا النهاردة عندنا ترجمة ب6 لغات، طبعا باللغة الإنجليزية والعربية والدارية والأسبانية والباشتو، وكمان اللغة الدارية. كل دول تقدروا ان انتوا توصلوا للغة اللي انتوا حابينها لما بتشوفوا عن طريق الكمبيوتر. بتختاروا الكرة الأرضية اللي موجودة على الشاشة، وبتختاروا بعد كده بتدوسوا على حرف AR عشان توصلكم للغرفة اللي فيها ترجمة اللغة العربية. لو متصلين عن طريق التليفون، بتبصوا على ال3 نقاط اللي أسفل الشاشة، وبتختاروا عن طريقها برضو اللغة اللي هي AR عشان توصلوا للعربي. شكرا لكم.
Thank you. At this time, will the Dari interpreter one please read the slide?
شام همه دوستان بخیر. به جلسه شب بسیار خوش آمدین. و عزیزایی که میخوان از ترجمه دری استفاده کنن، در پایان صفحه کامپیوترشان روی علامت کره زمین بزنن و در اونجا زبان مورد نظرشان که دری است انتخاب کنن و میتونن از ترجمه دری در او استفاده بکنن. دوستایی که از طریق تلفن یا گوشی موبایل خود وصل می باشن، اونا هم میتونن در قسمت بالای صفحه موبایلشون علامت 3 نقطه است، روی از او بزنن، قسمتی که مور هست او را انتخاب بکنن و میتونن از ترجمه که در اتاق مربوطه به زبان دری است استفاده بکنن. البته جلسه امشب به ارتباط برنامه سالانه تایتل 1 است و به لسانهای اردو، اسپانیشی، عربی، ویتنامی، پشتو و دری ارائه خواهد شد. تشکر. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, will the Pashto interpreter please read the slide?
ماښام بخیر ټول نه ډېر ماښام بخیر ټول نه مننه کوم چې زموږ جلسې ته نن راغلاست. تاسو کولی شئ چې د نن ماښامي د ټایټل 1 خپرونې دپاره کولی شئ د پښتو ژبې او د عربي اردو ژبو د خدماتو څخه استفاده وکړئ. که وکولی شئ دغه د کره‌ایي کومه علامه چې د ستاسو په کمپیوټر یا تلیفون کې هغه څخه استفاده وکړئ، د پښتو لپاره PA انتخاب کړئ، نو کولی شئ چې د دغه ترجمې څخه استفاده وشي.
Thank you. At this time, can the Spanish interpreter please read the slide?
Para español en su computadora, busque el globo en la parte inferior, haga clic para activar y escoja español. El icono cambia a ES, que significa español, y haga clic para listo. En su teléfono, haga clic para unirse al audio a través del internet, haga clic en los 3 puntitos, haga clic en interpretación, escoja español y haga clic para listo.
Thank you. And at this time, can the Urdu interpreter please read the slide?
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम। ये आपको टाइटल 1 प्रोग्राम में हम बहुत ज़्यादा खुशामदीद कहते हैं। आपका इसमें हिस्सा लेने का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। आज हम लोग आपको ये बताएंगे कि हम लोग ये मुख्तलिफ़ ज़बानों की जो तर्जुमा है तर्जुमानी कर रहे हैं, और आपको तर्जुमा हम लोग फ़राहम करेंगे। आपके कंप्यूटर पे अगर आप देखेंगे तो वहाँ पर एक तर्जुमानी का बटन होगा जो कि आपके कंट्रोल पैनल पे होगा। एक बार आप उसके ऊपर क्लिक कीजिए और आप चुनिए जो भी आप लोगों को ज़बान आपको मुंतखब करनी है, जो आप यानी समझ पाएंगे। इस सूरत में आप यानी उर्दू का इंतखाब करेंगे। उसके बाद आप आगे बढ़ेंगे तो आपको एक छोटा सा आइकॉन सा नज़र आएगा, और वो जो है वो उस वक़्त बदल जाएगा। फ़ोन के ऊपर भी आप क्लिक करेंगे कि आप वहाँ से जुड़ जाएं ऑडियो के ऊपर, और फिर आप लोग उसको क्लिक करेंगे ताकि वो जो कॉल है वो ओवर द इंटरनेट हो जाए। आपको फिर 3 नुक्ते नज़र आएंगे और वहाँ पर लिखा होगा मोर। आप उसके ऊपर बटन दबाइए और अपनी पसंदीदा ज़बान जिसमें आप लोग सुनना चाहते हैं उसका यानी कि इंतखाब कर लें। बहुत ज़्यादा शुक्रिया। थैंक यू।
Thank you. And at this time, could our Vietnamese interpreter please read the slide?
Vâng ạ, xin chào tất cả các anh chị đã đến với cuộc họp thường niên về chương trình Title One của hệ thống trường Prince William. Trong cuộc họp ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi có các phiên dịch đồng thời sang các ngôn ngữ khác nhau. Để lựa chọn thông dịch thì xin mời các anh chị lựa chọn như sau. Nếu các anh chị đang sử dụng trên máy tính thì tìm biểu tượng quả địa cầu như là ở trên hình vẽ các anh chị nhìn thấy, và sau đó thì nhấp vào các ngôn ngữ. Các anh chị cần nghe muốn chọn tiếng Việt và sau đó thì cái biểu tượng nó sẽ biến thành chữ VE. Vâng, nếu như các anh chị đang sử dụng điện thoại di động thì các anh chị sẽ nhấp vào biểu tượng là Joy Audio, biểu tượng cái tai nghe và sau đó thì nhấp vào Go over Internet. Sau đó nó sẽ có cái hình dấu 3 chấm, các anh chị nhấn vào hình dấu 3 chấm và lựa chọn Language Interpretation, tức là thông dịch ngôn ngữ, và sau đó nhấp vào ngôn ngữ mà các anh chị muốn nghe. Ở đây là tiếng Việt, Vietnamese, và sau đó thì các anh chị sẽ sẵn sàng để có thể nghe thông dịch. Xin cảm ơn các anh chị.
Thank you. At this time, we will turn on the interpretation. It will start now. You should see a globe on your screen. Ms. Martin, are we good?
We're good to go.
Okay. Welcome everyone to our Title I program annual meeting. My name is Teresa Dawkins-Smith. I'm the Title I Family Engagement Specialist. We are here tonight with Laura Pumphrey, our Administrative Coordinator Specialist of Title I and Title IV, and Victor Powell, the Supervisor of Title I and Title IV. Our agenda for tonight is we're going to do a welcome. We're going to do a quick grounding activity. We're going to give you information about Title I in Prince William County schools, the Title I application. We'll have a small discussion about family engagement and accountability. And then we will also talk about Prince William County Title I components, and then we'll adjourn tonight. So we would love to know who you are. We would love for you to type in the chat box your name and school that you represent. For example, I could put Teresa Smith and Featherstone Elementary. For Zoom, on your computer, you would click the icon that is the chat box, and you will be able to type there. If you're on Zoom on your phone, you would click the icon, you would go to the 3 dots and click the icon for chat, and you would be able to type there. Please take a moment and type in the chat box where you're from. Welcome. Welcome. I see many elementary and middle schools.
Oh, there's Freedom.
Oh, yep, I see a Freedom. We're so excited to have you guys here. Well, as you're doing that, we really hope that you learn a lot about Title I. We're going to ask you to please stay muted for this presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat box. We will be watching it. Type them in there. Okay, so we wanted to ask you a question tonight. Why did you decide to attend tonight's Title I annual meeting? Enter in the chat box any answers you may have. I see find out more information. We hope that you do get that. We do hope you find out more information about Title I and what it does provide to students, how it looks in Prince William County. So, Mr. Powell, we have a lot of wanting to seek information about Title I and how it is in Prince William County. That's great. Okay, and you're on, Mr. Powell.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Victor Powell. I'm the proud supervisor of Title I and Title IV. We're super excited to have so many people on, curious about not only our programs, but also just what kind of impact it is happening in Prince William. So we're super excited for those who are on tonight and to share the information. And just so many schools represented across the division, which is really good to see as well. And just that engagement is always something that we're super excited to have. I am super humbled to kind of share some information with you around Title I Part A, specifically within Prince William. We have a number of schools that we service. We have 28 elementary schools and 7 middle schools and 3 high schools that receive Title I funding. We really are cognizant of the language we use around that as far as helping people understand these are schools that receive Title I funds, just like schools receive a whole host of revenue funding, either federally or state funded, and really moving away from the labels that sometimes we put on schools. We don't label schools Title II schools or Title III schools or Title IV schools. Really, this is just another revenue stream. It's just like local funds or state funds that schools receive. It just comes with other guidance and procedures that we have to follow because of that, just like any other funding that we would have. And so these are the schools that we service through Title I, and the resources and data that we use to identify our schools within Prince William is usually within the threshold of that 40% of CEP, which is that community eligibility provision. And we do that in partnership with our food and nutrition data sources, really kind of seeing how are we qualifying and supporting the schools that have the highest need. And so those schools that are at 40% or higher end up qualifying to receive those Title I Part A funds. And again, Title I has been around for a while now, again, since 1965. And this is something that is literally locked in by legislation and law, which is one of the reasons why we've continued to receive the allocations within the federal grants for Title I consistently over the last couple of years as well. And this is something that we really want to make sure that is tied to student support and academic support and student academic achievement, while also making sure that we're doing just what we're doing right now, which is family engagement and educating our communities, educating our parents on ways that they can best support their students within the needs that they may have aligned with the school's needs as well. And so that Title I funding, really making sure that we're looking at those school systems across the board in our nation that really are utilizing, again, schools that have high metrics within either poverty, and then really what does that look like as far as how is that targeting student achievement across the board, specifically within math, literacy, and science, and within family engagement. Next slide. Again, just the models that we have here in Prince William, as far as schools that receive Title I resources, we choose to implement only school-wide. So there's different models that divisions have. It's usually either school-wide or targeted assistance. Targeted assistance would be more really just focusing on the specific students that would qualify for these resources, and those resources would only be able to go to those particular students that would qualify under that provision. Under the school-wide model that we have in Prince William, all students at the schools that receive Title I funding end up having that impact based on the metric that qualifies them to receive Title I funding. So all students within that school community, all parents within that school, that student community in that school end up benefiting and literally receiving resources, supports, the teachers in those buildings receiving professional development. So everybody at that school feels that impact in that school-wide program. So those are all our schools, our school-wide programs across the board. And again, align with that metric of 40% or above CEP, as we talked about in the previous slide, and really get that impact based on school-wide programs. And these funds are used to improve, as I said earlier, the overall academic program of the school. And it's usually, and most likely for us specifically, aligned to their CIP, their continuous improvement plan, which is directly aligned with the school's goals, their academic goals. So each school in Prince William has goals aligned to the strategic plan. If you've been paying attention, you know our division just adopted a new strategic plan, and that's going to be voted on by our school board. And all schools have to have goals aligned to that. And so that's what we mean by their CIP, or their continuous improvement plan, their academic goals around literacy, around math, around science, and around attendance at times. We make sure that we're using these resources to support schools within their goals, and then helping families understand how they can support their students at home align with those same goals as well, which is aligned with the qualifier as far as here are the schools that would be above that 40% threshold as far as CEP. And again, looking at that Title I school-wide team, the annual development of that school-wide plan, we definitely want to make sure that parents are leaning into that conversation and being a part of that based on the family engagement events that school may be having, or the committee that they're putting together to craft what their continuous improvement plan is and the goals that they have, and how they're educating their community on what those goals are within their family engagement. So if they're having literacy nights, talking to parents about what their literacy goals are. If they're having math nights, talking to their community about what their math goals are, and so on and so on. So people are educated on ways they can support their children outside of school, and ways that they can support their children with the work that's coming home. And a part of that process is a comprehensive needs assessment. So really, in a nutshell, that's really looking at what the needs are of that school based on the data that's given, to base all of the strategies, actions, and implementation goals aligned to what the needs of that building are, and really making sure the strategies are best practice and evidence-based, so that we're actually getting movement and some type of impact with what we're doing. And then really making sure that we have instruction by highly qualified professional staff. And in a nutshell, those are people who are licensed. Those are people who have experience to actually meet the needs of the kids based on the positions that they're hired for, in the qualification positions that they're hired for, and really making sure that school-wide plan has strategies for increasing parental involvement through a whole host of things, not just the family engagement events. We're really trying to help our schools understand it's not family engagement is just not tied to the 4 events that we're expecting them to have each year. How are they engaging their families outside of those events in a more personable way, even getting outside the 4 walls of the school, to take advantage of more authentic ways to engage within family engagement. And then really looking at that plans to facilitate the transition for our elementary schools, preschool to elementary. So how are we helping our families transition into our schools? For elementary, that might be elementary to middle school. For high school, that might be middle school to high school. So what are those transitional plans that we have built in, and structures we have for our families and for our students? And then what are the measures for including teacher input within that improvement of student performance and overall instructional programs? So it's not just how are we engaging our families, but how are we making sure teachers are at the front and center, because they're the ones boots on the ground in the classroom, to the instruction, and getting that teacher input on what's working, what is not working, and what things need to be changed, and really making sure that there's provisions for assistance for students that may be struggling in any area that's aligned to their continuous improvement plan based on their school-wide plan. So if there are literacy needs, math needs, or science needs, what are the ways that we're using these resources to support kids that need some additional supports or structures within their academic performance? Again, just a really overview on just how schools receive and where the funds come from within this. Those resources are, again, released to us through the legislation that I was speaking to earlier, related to the 1965 legislation, and that comes from the federal government, and then that directly comes to the states For us, that's the VDOE, or the Virginia Department of Education. And then the state is now then dispersing those resources out to each division based on the data that each state has and that division has based on their division's needs. And then I am then working with that same data to look at what are the division's needs based on the school's poverty metrics, what are the data the schools are showing me. And literally, I'm in that process right now of looking at the data for our schools to find out what schools would qualify for the coming year. And then when we receive that allocation, which is usually in September, that allocation of those resources are dispersed out to the schools. And what we always like to say is within Title I Part A is the resources and funding that we have are not local or not state funds. These are funds that are above and beyond what the state or what local funds have. So we are the sprinkles on the top. We are the cherry on the top. We are not taking the place of the vanilla ice cream or the cone. Those would be the state or local funds. Those are the things that across the board, everybody's going to get a cone. Everybody's going to get vanilla ice cream, but not everybody's going to get the additional sprinkles or cherry on the top or other toppings that may be there. For us, Title I Part A and those federal funds, they have to be based on the guidance above and beyond, in addition to what the state and what the local funding taxpayers have put in there to make sure that these are schools that require and are showing based on data that they need additional resources, additional support to make sure their school and their community gets what they need based on those equity needs. For us for this year, these are the schools that ended up qualifying, again, based on the metrics that we talked about earlier as far as our CEP data of the 40% threshold and above. So you see the elementary schools listed here and the middle schools and the high schools that were listed there as well. And then really looking at this 2025 and grant expenses and activities for this year, our allocation was around that 16.6 million. And then all those resources are then being dispersed based on the number of students and the poverty metric percentage to those 28 schools, 7 middle schools, and 3 high schools. And the bulk of that, as you see there, on average, 91% plus is going to those salaries and benefits, the people who are in the schools embedded, and then the rest you kind of see how it's broken out as far as extended learning. So that could be summer, or that could be after school programs, or even Saturday programs, depending on the school, professional learning for our teachers, and really those family engagement events and materials that schools see that happen 4 times a year or more in the buildings that are aligned to those school-wide continuous improvement plans, and then the instructional materials that we are supplying to schools in partnership with our Title I teachers based on the needs of some of those Tier 2 supports that our teachers are working with instructionally within our buildings. As always, as I said earlier, we want to make sure that we're grounding ourselves within our strategic plan. And again, we're going through a phase where we're, again, going into the 2030 strategic plan for us as far as looking at elevating our work within our division. And we, like anybody else, as far as the departments, are looking to align our work to the new strategic plan 2030. And for us, that's still going to be grounded in our core principles of learning and achievement for all, which is very much tied to our instruction, which is very much tied to the spirit and guidance of our grant, as far as how are we helping with student achievement. And you can see the goals of our division here that we will consistently not only look at meeting, but surpassing based on the goals, not just of our old strategic plan, but the one that we're phasing into for 2030 as well. And then as well, the one that I'm truly excited about, and the one that really hits the individuals who are on this call the most, which is that commitment 3 within family and community engagement. We do this in partnership, not just with you who are on the call, other departments within our division, as far as the family and community engagement office within our division, other departments as well, and even community partnerships through a whole host of things. And this will definitely be something that continues within the next strategic plan, and how we're elevating our work beyond the old strategic plan, and how we're looking at the events that we have, the partnerships, the strategies within family and community engagement, and how we've taken that to the next level in partnership with our division. And as always, again, our school-wide plans and the continuous improvement plans really all feed into how are we making sure that these goals are aligned to our new PWCS Strategic Plan 2030, and how are we making sure that our strategies and activities are going to lead us to meeting the goals, not just of our department and our own CIP department, but also the division's goals, and how are we making sure all those things are tight within the actions leading up to that, and making sure that you are leaning into those conversations and attending your school's Title I annual meeting so you can hear what your specific school's goals are and what metrics, what strategies, and asking questions of your school administrators, the teachers, the individuals, the leadership teams, and how that funding is going to be used, or what Title I teachers or what events or what strategies they're looking to do with the resources that their school is getting, so you can be aware of what that looks like for your specific schools. And for us, that funding from Title I and how it's going to be used to meet that specific school's academic goals based on their continuous improvement plan.
So we have a
So,
first question, just to keep you guys engaged with us, is what do you think should be a priority of the Title I program? So could you please type in the chat box to give us some ideas of something you think should be a priority for the program?
loving, I'm seeing family events. That's good. Helping students by providing additional resources for them to be successful. Yeah. Helping our students. Assisting with structures for equity and learning. It's good. This is good stuff. And this feedback is extremely helpful because it helps us really use this information, not just for us school-wide and division-wide, but really bringing information back to our schools to use this feedback to be helpful for informing specifically your specific school's feedback, and really what are the division-wide trends that we're seeing around what parents are saying are the priorities, for the resources that are allocated to our division. So this is very helpful.
Okay, so we're going to look at the component of family engagement in Prince William County. Family engagement is an important part of the Title I program. So each school that receives Title I funds is required to have a minimum of 4 family engagement events. One is the annual meeting, which we hope several of you attended in the beginning of the year. One is a Summer Thrive for the end of the year and to go off starting the summer, and then 2 other events that connect with the academics at the school. So you might see some schools having STEAM nights, or you might see literacy or math nights, or you might see writing nights. We encourage you to go to those because the school has really looked at their data to see what are some areas that they need some assistance on. On the division level, we host family engagement events also. Many of you hopefully went to our fall event at Hampton Middle School, our family camp back in October. It was a huge success this year. And we hope that we'll also see you at our spring event, which is kind of a mini family camp. It's during the weeknight. It's not on a Saturday like family camp was. But it's going to be on Tuesday, March 24th, and you will be getting more information out about that. And it will be at Bevel Middle School. We encourage your feedback for our events. All schools are required to give a survey at the end, and we really, really want to hear from you. So we use the input and the feedback from your survey in many different ways. The surveys that we have at the end of the events help us to really shape our events and to know the future, like what we should do in the future, to give some ideas, how the Title I funding should be used for the families and spent. We do have a survey at our family camp and at our spring event on the division level. And we really do read them, and we really do use it to help impact our events for the next coming out. Another big survey that we have is our end of the year survey. And this survey gets sent out to all families in all schools that receive Title I funding. And it helps us to get feedback on our program. So it comes out at the end of May, and you have a month to fill it out, and we really hope to get your input on it. It's an important survey because it helps us to see, are there areas where we kind of need to improve upon? Both surveys are electronic, and they are both translated into all the languages that Prince William County Schools support. With the surveys, we just want you to keep in mind why we have you fill them out. They're a way for us to hear your voice and your thoughts and your opinions and your suggestions. It's a way for us to hear what you want to say. It's a way for us to adjust what we're offering and to include things that you might feel are needed. And it's a way for us to evaluate our program. And it's a way for us to see if there are any barriers. So it helps us. Like, for example, one of our surveys said for our spring event that they would love for us to have transportation. And last year we did add a piece for transportation into our spring event. And we're hoping to do so again this year. So we do hear you, and we do value your opinion. Some of the feedback that we've received is that how the sessions, like for Family Camp 2025, is how the sessions were informative, that the kids loved Kid Camp, and they got ideas for the future. For our end of the year survey, the feedback we got is when to hold events. A lot of schools are really trying to hold events on days that were suggested in the survey, and also on reporting more about the school policy and just other topics in general.
Just access to accountability information that we have. Go to the next slide. So for us, as we look at this, a big piece of looking at the Title I Part A grant is, and for us, it's always, what's the impact that we're having on student achievement? What's the impact we're having within family engagement? So for us, using data to drive what our actions are, what our next steps are, is a huge deal. So for us, looking at what are those federal and state accountability measures that we have to look at specifically that are aligned to what are the metrics across the board for all of our students for accountability within the years that we have, and looking at year 5 here within the targets that need to be met, you'll see that here's the guidance on where each metric is laid out, that the federal government and the states are telling us this is where we should be across the board for each specific subgroup. And these are the targets that we need to hit. And these are the things that I know the division works with our schools on. I know we communicate with our schools as far as these are the goals, which oftentimes end up being the goals that schools have for their CIPs. And for this one, it's for reading. So when you're looking at that, every school has metrics that they have to hit annually each year, making that growth from year to year. And so this is what the year 5 targets were for this year. And then as that looks at for next year, as far as what their goals are to maintain that progress from year to year to year. So this is just a chart that kind of shows what those targets are and what goals schools might have within their continuous improvement plans aligned to the state and federal guidelines as far as what those metrics might need to be. Thank you. Same for mathematics. And again, where the goals that are here are really looking at how are our schools either meeting or exceeding these targets to improve from the previous year. And you can see the metrics from year to year to year, all the way back to 2021, what those progressional growth metrics are and what the states and what the federal government is expecting us to meet within those federal designations. And if schools are not, that's a part of the plans as far as what are we doing to make sure that we're supporting schools with the resources that we have that are targeted specifically on these goals that they may have within their CIPs, and how is our team with the resources that we have in our office based on literacy, based on math, based on family engagement, but specifically within this metric of math, how are we supporting and using the resources within their allocations that are going to be targeted to meet this need, and how are we making sure that those resources are concentrated on our specific schools that have goals that are in this specific need. Same with chronic absenteeism. Attendance is a huge impact within our schools. Again, if kids are not in school, if they're not in the classroom, then they can't receive that instruction. And that obviously has a greater impact within that student achievement. And you can see, again, the similar goals that the schools have and that the metrics are there as far as what that improvement needs to look like, as far as making sure that chronic absenteeism is showing that growth on an annual basis, and how that has a direct impact on kids' achievement, but also that support that teachers have as far as making sure that kids have that consistency within that instruction as well. And then really looking at this metric is related to our high schools as far as that federal 4-year graduation rate, the accountability metrics that are in there for that as far as percentages. Again, I know overall in our division, this is something that was very much touted within the previous strategic plan as far as having metrics above and beyond this 84%, and really making sure that we're pushing the entire division, not just our schools that receive Title I funding, beyond the 84%. But again, it's not just our high schools accountability with this. Our elementary schools and our middle schools play a huge part in making sure that our kids are prepared. So when they get to high school, they've had that entire progression from, depending on kindergarten, even before, all the way up into high school. So when they're getting to high school, their absenteeism percentages, or their math, or their literacy, or their science supports and achievement and instruction has been such of high quality that they are getting to high school and they're performing at the rate that they should, so that they are graduating and participating and engaging to help that graduation rate continue to increase. So it's definitely a shared partnership, not just on the shoulders of our high schools. And again, really for us, we have a strong partnership with the L department within our SOMs. And really a lot of the work that we do, boots on the ground in our schools, is very much in partnership with our English learner progress, and really looking at how we're monitoring that as a department. And so this is a goal that's very, very much near and dear to our team, but also to our department within SOMs, as far as how we're making sure that our students across the board in our schools that receive Title I funding are making continuous progress and meeting the targets within elementary, middle, and high school as far as that L progress targets, as we continue to move forward in year to year to year as we get into 2026 and 2027. As always, every parent, every community member has access to the Virginia School Quality Reports. This is a place where I go on a regular basis. I was literally just on this website yesterday as I was having a conversation with my director around just how schools are performing. If you really want to know, how your specific school is performing, or schools in your community, or any school in the state of Virginia is performing, I would definitely recommend going to this website. There's a lot of other websites that might be on your real estate websites or other community websites that try to give a rating on how a school is performing. But this is the best and really the only place I would direct families and community members to really understand the specific details on how schools are performing, their school data as far as their population, their demographics, their absenteeism data, all the data that we've shared tonight. You would see that even down to their teacher qualifications. There's so much information that you can get from these school quality reports, and you can see it from the division level, or you can see it from a school specific individual level, and you can download it and really kind of track it from year to year. And it's a really good spot, and it gives you 3-year trends. And so going there, you would basically just type in the school or the division, and that school would literally come in a drop down box. You would click on it, and all these beautiful reports would come up. And if you ever needed any questions or had any questions on how to read those, you can feel free to reach out to myself or our team, and we can definitely support you with that. But also reaching out to your school, they would really be able to help you with kind of looking at their school performance and any questions you have about their school specifically, or the school that your child attends. Next slide, please. The other piece which is related to us, and this was connected to the metrics that we were just sharing earlier as far as the goals that need to be hit. Really clicking on that ESSA tab really kind of shows the information based on what things are pending or what things are credited based on their status, given the resources that schools receive in our designation. And so it gives you another set of data that you're able to kind of see how this school is performing. And as you can see, there's so many tabs. You have the regular accreditation tab, the assessment, the enrollment, finances, the learning climate. There's so much information on top of the overall data that you would be able to see. But that ESSA tab would really give you some clarity on how this school is performing aligned with ESSA. Next slide, please. And then every school is mandated to have this website and this information on their webpage related to Title I. And there's a direct link that will take you to that ESSA website. That's basically the Virginia School Quality link that shares all the information that we just saw on the last 2 or 3 slides related to how the school's performing, their state accreditation information, their ESSA accreditation information, and school data. Every school in Prince William that received Title I funding has this tab within their webpage, and we're just using Grand Park as an example of where to find that as far as the school or our school tab. And then you would see their Title I tab and then their Title I information that's going to be there in their family school compact with the link directly to the ESSA page that we were just highlighting. So
I got this part.
Okay.
Also on the webpage, you will find our family engagement policy. Each school has a policy, which is on their web pages, but also we have a policy on our Title I web page. So you can find the whole policy that we're going to be reviewing in a minute on the web page right at your fingertips, and it is translated into all the languages that Prince William County supports. Okay, Mr. Powell, there you go.
So looking at this, as far as the engagement policy, just those general expectations, we want to make sure that we're, again, aligning ourselves to what the federal guidance, has for us, and then making sure that the programs and activities that our parents are getting that engagement, as we talked about earlier, not just within the events, but even beyond the 4 events that we're expecting within our schools that receive Title I funding. And then what does that support look like as far as within the policies, but also our homeschool compacts? And then really, how are we including, our families within that planning and operation? How do we make sure that families have a seat at the table? So please leaning into getting involved in your school's plans and really getting information related to the activities and programs that are taking place within the family engagement activities. And then really making sure that our families have those opportunities across the board, regardless of the demographic, as far as our ELs, our students with disabilities, and participating in those programs and meetings and other activities in a whole host of ways, whether it be through the surveys or in-person opportunities and making sure that our schools are removing those barriers so that families can participate and share their information, and that our schools that receive Title I funding is really carrying out those programs and activities aligned with the federal guidance so that there's meaningful and authentic, parent involvement.
And it's time for our first poll. You should be seeing it popping up on your screen. We would love to have your feedback for this. How much are you aware of your school's Title I program, as far as awareness in your school? Are you aware of it? So you would click, I am aware of it, I'm not aware of it, or I have some questions. So they're coming in. We'll give about, 10 more seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Majority are aware, which is good. We've been working hard on that. Okay, I'm in the poll. So we see that we have 63% that are aware. We have 4% that have some questions. Hopefully those questions will get answered tonight. And we had some that were not aware. So we still have some work to do, but we are working on that. Okay.
So just looking at the components for family engagement, again, the policy components, really is making sure that the schools are convening that annual meeting so that we can make sure that that 33% that I'm seeing on here is very much aware of what's taking place within Title I. That's the opportunity every single year that all of our schools are having that annual meeting on a regular basis, making sure that they're explaining, again, very similar to what we're doing tonight, what Title I is and what it is not to their families. So making sure that people are aware of that information and making sure people have an opportunity to have questions answered within that annual meeting, and unpacking that not just at this point as far as the division level, but making sure schools are really explaining those requirements as we are doing tonight, and the rights that parents and families have to be involved and within that process. And making sure that, similar to tonight, we're inviting our families to the schools and making sure this is something that's ongoing for our schools and in a timely way based on the feedback that families are giving, so that parents can be a part of that planning and reviewing and improvement, not just of the division Title I program, but also at the school level as well. So the feedback that we're getting tonight, even the poll that we just had, is very helpful for us to take that information and kind of share how are we helping our division-wide parent and family engagement policy across the board. And then really providing families and helping families participate with their children as far as timely information. How can we improve on that? And then really looking at that explanation of the core academic curricula that we have within literacy, within mathematics, and within science, especially aligned with our schools and our divisions, not only strategic plan, but the CIPs that we are supporting within our Title I application. And how are we assessing that? How are we looking at that progress monitoring based on student progress and proficiency levels that we talked about earlier that are within those federal metrics to make sure that students are meeting those expectations, and then really making sure we have opportunities consistently throughout the year for people to give suggestions and participate within the decisions to support their kids' education. Okay.
So we have our second poll coming up, and where we just want to know, did you attend your school's Title I annual meeting? All the schools that receive Title I resources and funding hold a Title I annual meeting during the month of August, September, or October. So did you attend it? That's our first one. Yes, I did attend it. I did not attend it. I was not aware of the annual meeting. Some annual meetings might have been during your back to school night. They had them, some schools did have them right before, right after, or like right during if you get choose centers. So it might not have been a specific night. It might have been included with that. Some schools also did have it during the open house in August. So it might have been right before you went out to meet your kids' teachers. So just so you're aware about that. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll. And we can see, ooh, we have many that did not attend the annual meeting. We really strongly encourage you. We're very happy for those who could have, but strongly encourage you that if you can to attend it, it's a way to get your say in, your voice in. You get input on your compacts. You find out about what the plans are for the year. You hear some of the academic information. Even if you were not aware about it, that helps us out too, just so we can let the schools know. Okay.
And really looking at specifically that academic data that we were talking about earlier within the school's continuous improvement plans. In that annual meeting, the schools and even within the meetings that we've had even tonight, as far as what are the goals that the school may have, how are they sharing that? And if you're attending those annual meetings, you'll be able to get, okay, what is the data that the school is using? What's the data that the division is using within our strategic plan to really meet the needs that our kids have, either across the board, but also in our schools, and then really being able to use those opportunities to provide assistance for parents and families within the Title I Part A program that's appropriate based on the content and standards that that specific school needs to address. And how are they measuring that? That's the big thing for us. What is the measurement? What's the impact across the board? And how are they going to monitor that either as a school, but then also what does that look like for your individual child's progress, especially if they have a need within any of those areas? And how are you going to work with the educators that are supporting your child to look at that improvement process for your child? And then really looking at what are those opportunities to really review, as Teresa was saying earlier, to kind of lean in and have a seat at the table on the school's continuous improvement plan and what input and feedback you may have based on the school-wide goals, because that directly impacts your child, that directly impacts the resources. Like any other plan, the budgets are tied to that plan. And so, you know, if you want to know the school's plan, you want to know where the resources are going, you would want to be able to make sure that you have a seat at the table that's aligned to that, which is obviously aligned to our division strategic plan, because those materials and trainings that we are supporting as a division, but also that the school is requesting for their specific either family engagement or academic needs, are going to be directly aligned with how they help in the families and parents to really work with their children outside of school to help improve that individual achievement.
Okay, and we have one last poll, and this is going to be about your school's CIP. So are you aware that your school of your school's CIP, which is the continuous improvement plan, which is also has your Title I school-wide plan in? So it's either I am aware of it or I am not aware of it. We still have some people voting, so. Give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, we're going to end the poll. This is exciting to see that many are aware of it. If you're not aware, this is something they cover at the annual meeting and also at back to school night, sometimes at open house too. So strongly encourage you just to find out a little more about it. If you want to know more about it, feel free to ask too.
Within just really looking at the other piece as far as not just within family engagement for the activities, but also just what does that look like as far as improving the student academic achievement and school performance, which is very much aligned to not just knowing what the CIP is for each school, but the goals and strategies that that school has. For us, it's really partnering with the Title I teachers as far as making sure that those meetings with our families are discussing the family engagement plans and really looking at the activities to showcase how are we making sure that our Title I teachers are looking at what is going to be needed for our families and how are they consistently developing things that are effective for families within their family engagement plan, and really making sure that our schools that receive Title I funding work with our team and other central office partnerships within family engagement, and obviously working with Teresa as well within the family engagement specialist to ensure that there's a level of school level parent and family engagement plans that are written with the guidelines aligned with the guidance that we talked about earlier within the federal government, and just encouraging that strong family engagement practices and framework that we believe in across the board within Prince William that builds strong and authentic relationships beyond an event, and that are culturally responsive for all of our families, and really link right back to those student achievement goals, because that's what we're here for. We're in the business of student learning. We want to make sure that students have the best possible learning environment possible that's helping them grow in their learning and supports that are there for them, and really making sure that the policies are clear and understandable across the board for all of our families. And then making sure that, as we said earlier, and even throughout this entire presentation, how are we getting input from our families at the school level and division level to make sure that we're working on these compacts that are ultimately making an impact in our community and for our parents and for our kids.
We have a question in the chat that says, can schools host more than 2 Title I meetings per year?
Yeah, so as we said earlier, we're expecting our schools to have at least 4 events within their buildings. We want to, again, make sure that at least 2 are tied to their academics, but there's nothing saying that our families and our schools can't have all 4 of their events tied to their CIP. And there were some schools this past year who had gone above and beyond just having the 4, and they had 5, and some of them, in the cases, 6. So yes, they definitely can have more. We definitely encourage that that participation, as far as if that's a need, if that's something that's showing us that the families really are not just engaged attendance wise and participation wise, that there's a need there of schools wanting to go above and beyond what our expectation is of just the 2 academic and 2 additional family engagement events that's tied to those schools' needs. But yes, they definitely can have more than 2, at least with the resources that they receive through Title I. Schools also have additional resources if they wanted to do other events as well, but at least with the resources they receive through our Title I family engagement budget, they can definitely do more than 4. And again, really looking at what does that coordination look like between the family engagement activities with other PWCS programs. This is something that's really a passion of mine and a passion of our offices. What I'm always saying is, how are we co-parenting together? So how am I working, or how is our team working with other offices, other departments, other community partnerships, that we should be co-parenting all day long. This person lives here, we live here, but we have our kids in common. We have our babies in common, right? So how are we making sure that our communication, our efforts, our resources are being jointly plan for our students in our schools that receive Title I funding, and what does that look like as far as in partnership with Head Start, special education. Those are just a few of the departments that we have partnered with in the past, but there's a whole host of individuals pretty much across the board in our division that we want to make sure that we're bringing the best and brightest, and those who have the resources to make sure that it's a one-stop shop for our families. So that division staff and parents across the board for our division events, but also in our school events, get what they need based on what the needs assessments are showing at our school level, but also at our division level as well. And then really looking at that, as we talked about earlier, the data that we collect from our annual survey, we really use this to kind of drive what comes out for our family engagement policy, and really looking at how that determines just what are the barriers that parents are telling us that may be there. As Teresa was saying earlier, there was a need, and families were saying that there was a need within transportation. So that was something that we wanted to try in years past as well. So we're always looking to take the input that we're getting from surveys or taking the input that we're getting from parent feedback to kind of drive what are some things that we can do to remove barriers. And then really looking at what are the results examined based on the trends and dissemination based on the school administration and teachers and other stakeholders that we have are in our schools that receive Title I funding to develop and improve our school policies within family engagement. As always, again, we want to make sure that each school is working with parent and family engagement meeting details regarding the topics that parents and family may need as far as materials, and then working with central office as far as ourselves within the Title I Part A program to really assist schools with what are the proper materials and trainings to help our families work with students to improve their academic achievement. So this may show up within our family camps. This may show up within the individual family engagement events that schools are having that's aligned to their needs and their CIP, that's really helping families understand here are the academic supports that will be helpful for a child or children aligned with the needs that the school may have. And really, what does that partnership look like with central office as far as our department ensuring that the information related to family engagement and meetings and activities that's sent out to families and children is in a way that is translated, that is understandable, and that is in a format that parents and community members can receive, that's practical in a language that they can receive and understand, very similar to tonight and very similar to how we communicate with any materials that come out from our office. And then really working with our translations and interpretation services within our Title I family engagement events and meetings, such as tonight, to ensure that our families have access an opportunity to participate, but also to lean in to the conversation using those resources that we have within Title I to make sure, as we said earlier, using transportation resources to support attendance at our events that are sponsored by Title I Part A or different events or meetings as well. Now, at this time, we want to make sure that we kind of open it up again. Do you have any questions? And if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat, as some people have been doing thus far this evening, and so that we can respond to the questions you may have. Even if there's questions that come up after tonight, I can make sure that I put my email address in the chat so that if people have questions, you can feel free to reach back out to myself or our team, and we can follow up, because sometimes you have questions after the fact as well. We definitely want to make sure that we're being responsive to the questions or queries that are there. I know there was the poll earlier said that there's questions that you may have for your school teams, but this is an opportunity that we can also open up for questions for myself or our team. So please feel free to put those questions in the chat. Teresa, if you could help me kind of see if there's other questions that come up.
So far, nothing.
Okay. Well, we can use our teacher wait time and make sure people have an opportunity to process.
Will you have another meeting?
So we do have multiple opportunities, at least that our office gives throughout the year. So earlier this year, we had our fall family camp, and hopefully many of you, if not all of you, participated in coming to that. That was obviously an opportunity for people not only to give feedback, but also to engage with us in person, because we definitely don't mind doing the virtual and having this in this platform, but we also appreciate when we're actually able to see and have face-to-face conversations. So our fall family camp was a great opportunity to connect on like this type of platform, obviously this platform, and then we'll have, as Teresa was saying earlier, we will have our spring family camp, which will be at Bevel, which is another in-person opportunity to get information, to connect with us, but also to get sessions and information and materials that are aligned to the needs that we've heard from families based on things that they're looking for to set their child up for the spring, but also for next year as well. So those are opportunities. And then again, we always have an annual survey at the end of the year for families to be able to give input that we will have on an annual basis. And then you always have an opportunity to give feedback or to give us information related to the things that are taking place at your respective schools through those surveys that are there as well.
Will there be transportation provided for family camp in the March? The answer is yes. We are working with transportation on that. And then does Title I funding cover pay teachers for after-school tutoring at schools as we get closer to the end of the year SOL testing?
So yes, there are schools that utilize their Title I budgets for after-school tutoring. There are also, if those of you who are not aware, the schools have received over the last couple of years a plethora of resources through the all-in tutoring that they are mandated to use and to spend. So pretty much every school has resources that are already dedicated to after-school tutoring that they need to spend first. And then there are some that need additional resources once those budgets have been spent down. And then once they do, if schools need additional resources to support their after-school tutoring, once they've exhausted those funds, there are schools that we would support with that based on their need. But all in is definitely resources that are not all in resources that come from us, but it's resources that all the schools from the state are mandated to use for that specific reason within tutoring.
Okay, so that's it for right now.
Okay.
If you do have more questions, we will have information where you can email us.
As always, we want to make sure that you understand our work is very much grounded in the work of Dr. Karen Mapp. If you're not aware, we have had her partnership throughout this year through a whole host of ways, either professional development, family engagement, opportunities for staff and for families. And she's been pretty much embedded in the work that we've been doing this year. And her framework is something that we build into our school's work, our work as well. And so for us, it's really, what does that look like to make sure that we have a full and equal and equitable partnership, as I said earlier, that co-parenting relationship among our families and educators and community partners to promote, again, what we're in the business of doing, which is children's learning and developing from literally from birth to that college and career. So for us, is how we partner with school partnerships outside of the school. Within families that are raising their kids and they know they're going to be within Prince William, but all the way, how are we supporting our high school kids and our families within college and career opportunities within the partnerships we have inside and outside of Prince William. So for us, really this quote from Dr. Karen Mapp is something that we are definitely aspiring to within our division, is very much embedded into our strategic plan 2030, Elevate. And it's definitely something that we're looking to continuously partner with our families on, ensuring that we are embodying this as a department, but also as a division within what does that look like to make sure that we are literally walking alongside and co-parenting with our families throughout the entire process of their kids within our schools. So we definitely appreciate your partnership within this.
Okay, so if you want to take a screenshot or jot down real quick, thank you for your partnership. please feel free to contact us. And here's our contact information. We do appreciate you joining us tonight, and we appreciate just registering. Look out for things that your schools will be offering you and for our March event. And thank you for coming tonight, and have a good evening.
Have a blessed night, everybody. Be safe. Stay in the house. Stay warm. We're very